Okay, so I'll need to be a bit further back, I think. So just sitting comfortably as always, hopefully reasonably comfortable forwards in your chair, so a bit of space behind there, but always remember there's always a case to be made for sitting back. Another thing you can do is get some kind of back support. And one of the things I've realized is that you can buy these things for cars, these wedge-shaped cushions and things like that, and they're quite good. They can give a bit of support for your lower back. So that's another possibility. I've got one. I'll bring it to the session next time and show you how it can be used. So there's plenty of options for making yourself comfortable. Don't just sit there and think, right, it'll be okay in a few years' time, even though I'm tensing up. Sit back and rest whenever you need to. And then just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Belly. And then your legs. So sit back. So you won't have much support from your legs here, maybe a little bit of pressure in your heels, but the main thing, of course, is to let yourself sink back, feel the support of the back of the chair, and look for that feeling of just dropping back and letting go is the phrase often used. It's a slightly unfortunate phrase, I think, because it implies it's quite easy to let go, sort of thing, but it's not that easy, and especially if, for some reason you tense up, if you've had a problem, an injury or something like that, even a long time ago, all of those things will have an influence. So don't think of this as being easy. Just look for those glimpses of times when things just settle. And very quickly what will happen is you'll stiffen up again, or maybe you'll concentrate on one shoulder. Oh, that feels nice and relaxed, and you'll think about the other shoulder, and then the other shoulder will come up again, and so on and so forth. It's just gradually we get accustomed to this settling down, and we get accustomed to coming back to that, to refinding, if you like, this quieter, softer space that we can rest in. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. And then when you bring your feet back in, you come forward, the same thing again. Structure and posture are very important in Tai Chi. It would be very hard to sit back in your chair if your chair was uncomfortable, or if you felt that the chair might collapse or something like that. And in the same way, without a good structure in your body, without a good posture, this letting go, this dropping of your center of gravity, and everything that goes along with that is very hard to achieve. And that's why, at least some of the time, try and sit forwards to make that connection in your mind between what happens in your shoulders and what's happening in your feet. And it sounds odd to say, but we often lose touch with our feet. Everybody does this, in my experience. So the more we can consciously and deliberately be aware of those connections and feel, yeah, if I go forward slightly, there's a bit more pressure in the feet, and feel how your feet are holding you up. The stronger those connections will become. It's a hardwiring process in the nervous system, and there'll be a spillover, a benefit from this into the standing, because those connections will be there for you to make use of. So weight slightly forwards. You can raise your heels for a few moments to feel a bit more pressure in the balls of your feet, but don't stay like that, because the calf muscles will stiffen up. So just slowly lowering down. It's quite subtle, but it works that focusing of our intention quite well when we're in the chair to do that. If you can't feel it at all, another little adjustment you can make is some kind of bolster, some kind of cushion, firm cushion, or again, like these yoga pads and things like that may help you. Not too high, and you might want to think about the height of the chair as well. So supported from your feet, supported from your hips, supported from within your body as much as possible, and just slowly turn. So all of that work with the structure, work with our posture, helps to release the tightening that we experience, just a full habit. Once again, it won't just magically dissolve away, but it will gradually go away. And focusing on that stronger feeling, that feeling of support every now and then, will increase your confidence in being able to use it. We get so accustomed to sitting, standing, moving in certain ways that we become convinced subconsciously that's the only way to actually move and to stand and to sit. So some of the process in Tai Chi I would describe as unlearning. We have to unlearn old ways of movement, old ways of holding ourselves, give space for the new ways to take effect. And then hands in front of your shoulders, circling around. So once we've got a sense of that space, we want the movement to fill that space, not to strain against it. And there's a fluid quality, a water-like quality to that space. And like water filling the space, it will just sort of dissolve away the barriers. And then going forwards. So we want to increase the range of our movement, and sometimes it might be appropriate to stretch. I think stretch is a useful thing for us all to do. But in terms of what we're doing here, it's not what we're trying to do. The movement itself will have the effect of enlarging its range. Hands down to your sides. Just rotating your arms. Feeling the opening and closing in your ribs, chest, and in your lower back when the hands roll back and the palms are forward. It's as though the shoulder blades pull together, and then here, it's like the rib cage holding in on itself, drawing the shoulder blades apart. This too contributes to the space, because if it was just our arms and our shoulders involved in this, it adds to the effort that we're having to make there. So we're always looking to spread the load through the whole of the body. And then raising your arms. and back the other way. And now tilting forwards, and again making note of how you're using your legs to support you and then to push you back. So this feeling of a bit of pressure in the legs. Imagine if you were doing this in water and you were leaning forwards into the water. The further you went, the greater the pressure would be. And eventually what happens is you'd have to strain to go any further. So there's just a natural point where there's a changeover and you get pushed back. And there's two things in the other direction. One is at a certain point we reach that upright position and then gravity will pull us forwards. But at the same time, and this very much applies to the seated exercises, we feel that same pressure in the hips and the lower back and buttocks, and they push us forwards. When we come to standing, that pressure is equal in, well, not equal, but is felt all the way down through the hips, buttocks, legs, feet, as a continuum. But here in the seated exercises, they alternate. So it's a chance to focus on both. So if you're in the standing, you find that it doesn't work very well. It may be that this exercise gives you an opportunity to think, oh, actually, it's in the legs or the knee or the hip, because we're breaking the movement down just a little. Sometimes it's easier to sort of analyze these things. Now turn a little. You will feel, in particular, now you'll notice it quite strongly, I suspect, as we do this, that from here to here, the opposite side that you're turning on, there's this extension. So what I would describe as a soft stretch, and a soft stretch is one that doesn't go to the full limit, but just opens out. The kind of thing you might do if, say, for instance, you just washed a shirt or a top or something, and you were just pulling it out a little bit. You wouldn't wrench it right out, but you just pull it back into shape, sort of thing. And then on the side. Another way of thinking of this is that any movement that you make in these arts, you should feel that you could have moved a little bit further. So there is still that space around you. And then going around, and with this one in particular, moving from your hips and your shoulders, and almost swirling feeling all the way through your upper body, and your spine, your ribs, and the organs, because that space allows for a freedom of movement. So this takes us into this idea of the energy within the movement. So we've taken, this is a direct line from an awareness of our posture and structure through to the flow of energy that we're looking to harmonize. And then go back in the other direction. And then one foot stepping forwards. So that harmonization of the movement, of the energy, the restoration of just a natural flow, you could regard as one of the key aims in Tai Chi, from a health point of view. And then on the other side, and it's not a purely physical thing. It's hard to get that flow if your mind's a bit scattered. You know, if you've had a busy morning and you're still thinking about this, that, and then what you've got to do next, and so on and so forth, that will have a direct impact on the movement, and vice versa. So these three elements, mind, body, energy, very much influence each other, and then alternating from side to side. We might want to put the emphasis in a certain aspect of this. If you have had that busy morning and your thoughts are a bit distracted, then focusing on what's happening in your body, both in terms of structure and movement, may be a good thing. It may work better for you to focus on the flow of the movement and let that just calm your attention, and so on and so forth. It depends what is appropriate at any particular time. So just adjust your posture, because you probably slipped down a bit. I know I did. Come back to the sitting position. So as we go through the exercises that you're familiar with, there are many different ways that we can look at them, and which way we choose at any particular point. Obviously, in a class, I might point out certain aspects, but particularly in your own practice, but even in a session, you might choose to focus on one thing or another, according to what is appropriate to you at the time. These exercises and all the principles are like tools, and if you have a toolbox or a toolkit or something like that, if you want to bang a nail in, you might have a really good screwdriver that you paid a lot of money for, but it's going to be no good for banging the nail in. Whereas if you sort of like have a cheap hammer, you can do it, or vice versa. So pick the aspect that is working for you at the moment, not to reject the other aspects, but simply because this is what is required right now. So weight mostly back, hands dropping down to your sides. Take your hands out and then forward fold this way. Sometimes a switch of perspective can be useful. So you're just sitting there thinking you can't quite get this to work, with that sense of just being tight in maybe your shoulders or your back. Remember what I've been talking about the last few sessions, which is this sense of the opposite movement. So we can switch our perspective to, for instance, the rear part of the body, this part of the body where we feel the spine entering the pelvis region. Imagine somebody just pushing you and pulling you from that place. And that's where we will start to focus our effort through the focus of attention. And sometimes putting less effort into, say, that area in the shoulder, which feels a bit tight, takes away the sort of tightness, because we can be thinking about it so much, it can become almost a bit obsessive. And then fisherman cast the net. The other thing that can do, of course, is to just allow you to observe how much of the movement you inherently know. You might be thinking, oh, do the arms do this or do this or whatever. Changing the perspective, you might just notice that your arms get on with the job because they're so familiar with the movements. What some people refer to as muscle memory. But I suspect it's more than just muscle. I think it's to do with this interaction between those three elements of body, mind, and movement. The effect they have, certainly on muscle, but on the nervous system and our awareness and so on and so forth. and then rolling the ball. And pigeon spreads its wings. Let's cast your mind back a little bit earlier in the session. Remind yourself of that feeling, support we get from feet, legs, and hips, especially as we go forwards. See if you can just feel that as part of this movement. One more time. And pushing a wave. Feel the hand stay in front of your hips, but your elbows still going out of the top. As you go forwards and feel your weight in your feet more, again, you could raise your heels a few times as you go forwards if it helps. Feel that, you know, as you do that, you raise your heels. There's a sense of your hands being pushed up through that. You don't strain in your shoulders to bring your hands, they curve up very gently. And then hands fisted. And then turn. Notice what's happening in your ankles, your knees, your hips. Don't let them tighten up. Same thing, elbows, shoulders, wrists. We're a bit more difficult with the weight bearing parts of your body, of course. Soften around the joints as you go, as you feel your weight going into them. Feel the effect that has on the muscles. So you might want to pick maybe just one knee or one ankle to do that with. You'll understand how building of the muscle, and tendons and ligaments, and ultimately the building of the whole structure, the strengthening of the whole structure guides you into being able to maintain that openness and that space in the joints, and that will reduce the pain in the joint, reduce the wear and tear of the joint. Good. Now this time, come back, turn your hands palm down. Imagine that pull on the base of your spine, pulling you in one direction, so you turn and then you go forwards. So the pull swinging you back. Hands remain in that hip height. Just be very careful when you do go forwards. Notice any stiffness, particularly in the lower part of your back. Just let the movement with its gentle massaging quality begin to ease that stiffness. This is polishing the table. Keep going. I'm going to stand up and show you this from behind, because I think some of you may have seen me do this before, but I think it's worth noting what is going on here. You can see more clearly here, watching this part where the spine goes back and around and then across to the other side. Weight stays more or less in the middle there. So turn. So very much one of those exercises where it's more obvious standing from the side. You can see I turn and then I go back. This is exaggerated, by the way. So you wouldn't necessarily expect to do it this much, but I turn, going back, swinging around. Just do a couple more seated. Good. Bringing your hands in and then push it up. So that feeling that I described as pressure in the lower part of the body, you want it to, in a sense, increase a little bit. Excuse me. So imagine here that you're pushing the ball down into water and you get stronger and stronger. And then there's this upward movement, this upward energy filling up through your belly, the chest, and the shoulders. With this exercise, you'll feel it mostly around belly, hips, waist, lower back. And change into the wild goose. The same thing here, because your arms are going out, you feel a sort of filling up around about the area of your solar plexus. So coming up from your feet through your knees and your thighs into your belly and into the solar plexus and down. And with the downward movement, every now and then, feel as though it's like water draining away. You stand beneath the shower, the water goes over your skin, takes the dirt away. And in the same way, that internal feeling sometimes seems to just take away the tightness, tension. And then parting the clouds. one more. And we'll go back to the first of these, the rooting down, stringing them together into a little sequence. So we can just focus on that gradual rise and fall, first of all into the belly, and then change into the wild goose belly, up into the solar plexus, and then apart in the clouds, belly as you come back, solar plexus, and then up into the upper part of the chest. And then back to the start of the sequence, and once again, and see if you can just focus on this pattern of expansion and contraction within the body. So when we get to the exercises that follow on from this, like Dragonflux the Stars from the sky, we can feel the same thing happening. Let's do one more round of this. Then we're going to change to Dragonflux the Stars from the sky. Focus of attention on one side more than the other. And again, belly, solar plexus, upper part of the chest in the expansion. Draining away again in the contraction. And then shifting from one side to the foot. Bit of a push down through foot and hip. And belly, solar plexus and chest once again. Last time. Push it in two directions, same expansion as the first one. And then for the second, as you feel the expansion beginning to reach the chest, just redirect the arms, pushing out, mostly by the elbows dropping down. So it's quite simple. Pushing up. And pushing out. See here, I drop my elbows down, but the movement continues, but broadening quality across the chest. And then this time, just add in the little turn, but still feeling that expansion through belly, chest, and so on. So careful how you turn. One more round. So make this the last one. Pushing your hands out. As you do, these paws with one leg, knees staying bent, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. So, of course, still focusing your attention on that rear part of the center of the body. You might want to think about the whole of the center, just sort of rotating forwards and then backwards. The weight will move a little, but not a great deal in this chair-based exercise. And then switch into grasping the tiger's ears. So most people find that they get some of these ideas with one particular exercise. It'll be different for everybody, not necessarily the same exercise. Once you've found things like that expansion and contraction and the opening and closing and so on and so forth in one exercise, it's more likely that you're going to find it elsewhere. But some exercises do lend themselves better than others to certain elements. And switch over. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Good. And come back and sit. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Right, now once again, rubbing your hands together. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. And one shoulder. Your arm. And then on the other side. And the upper part of the chest. belly. And finally, legs. Very much just go around your hips a little bit here. You can reach them comfortably. If you can't, then don't worry. And then stand. Keep the chair with you. If it helps you to have some of the support from the chair, stand in. So when we do things like those tapping exercises, when we do any of the exercises really, if we have this idea about the flow through the body, the flow of energy through the body, anywhere that we work will help that flow everywhere. Obviously, some exercises, some movements, some techniques are particularly good for particular parts of the body. Just as in acupuncture, there are these points all over the body. I think it's 260 or 360. I can't remember. There's a lot of points, and there are whole manuals on which points to use for which parts of the body, because some are more effective in other ways than others. But I did hear about one acupuncturist who only ever did one point, because his idea was once it starts flowing somewhere, then it will flow everywhere sooner or later. It's like if you've got a river that's clogged up, once you start to unclog it, once you start to pull some of the rubbish out or something like that, and the flow increases, it will increase all the way down through the river. So even if you can't, I said about sitting in the chair, if you wanted to do, say, your hips or your lower back, and you couldn't quite reach it because you're in the chair, it still have an effect. And then when you stand, you could do something like this. You could go around your hips like this. That could be quite good. Keep the hips soft. And you can do the lower back, well, very gently on the lower back. So they're good ways of loosening the body up. And I haven't said to you before, bear in mind that we do them standing, we do them in the chair. But I also had somebody, I remember once somebody saying to me in the class that they started doing it in bed before they got up in the morning, and then they had a problem with falling, and quite often, this is not uncommon, they were the most wobbly, the most liable to fall when they first got out of bed. We're always half asleep, aren't we? And they found if they laid in bed and did these tapping exercises on whatever parts of the body they could reach, they were more alert and more awake and more stable when they stood up. So again, these things are like tools. You can use them any other way. I mean, that was her idea. But once in a class when I said that, somebody came up to me and said, she said, I'm glad you said that, because I do that and I wasn't sure if I'm allowed to. And of course you're allowed to. As I say, these are like tools. So once you become familiar with something, you can make use of it in all sorts of different ways, not just the original way that you were taught it. So feet parallel. And just sinking down. Another thing you can do that is a transferable thing from seated to standing, or even from laying in bed to seated to standing, is that awareness of posture and structure, maybe your breathing as well. And again, bringing your attention to different parts of the body helps with this whole process of hardwiring, training your nervous system to be alert, to be aware of things that maybe we didn't notice before. Quite often we're only really significantly aware of a particular part of the body when it's given us trouble. And that can be a very negative thing, because it means that we then associate, being aware of, say, the knee or the shoulder, whatever, and it being painful. So we want to try and break that relationship if we can. And again, that's regardless of which particular way you're using these exercises. Now change into the wild goose. Just noticing those areas of the body where there is a flow. Sometimes it's good to notice not what's not working. This can be a bit depressing, quite honestly, but where it is working. Where do you feel the flow? Where have you got that feeling that you want to try and encourage in the rest of the body? And then parting the clouds. Good. 1 foot forwards. Transferring your weight. Just resting for a moment with your weight over each leg, down in each leg. It takes a few moments for that to happen. We need, it's like if you've ever sat on the beach and watched the waves go in and go out, arguably, this is an example often given in Tai Chi, wave goes forwards, wave goes back, because that's a reflection of that fluid type movement that we look for. But waves don't just go in and go out. They go in and then they'll kind of drain away through the sand and the pebbles. And then you go back. I don't know what happens out at sea, actually. It's harder to see, isn't it? But you get the idea. Just take that moment of pausing. So if we focus on that, we'll also develop that ability in our mind to just find in the middle of the movement that sense of settling. And again, that's something that has many applications, in those busy times, and there's a lot going on. Just to find that quietness, that space for a couple of moments is a great advantage. It's also during that time that we begin to raise our toes and our heel. So sometimes we feel as though we haven't got time to find that space, whether it be physically or mentally. I'm not really sure that there's an important distinction there myself. Overlap. But in fact, looking for that space, finding that space can actually give you space, not just in terms of your body or from your thoughts, but kind of around you. When things are getting on top of you, the best thing to do is to sit back and just take a few breaths and settle and just go back into whatever's going on with that clearer attention. Stepping in. So Tai Chi teaches us to find that quality of space and stillness and quietness within the movement and potentially within quite stressful situations. And then on the other side. But that sounds unlikely. Remember that traditionally, historically, and currently, Tai Chi is an effective martial art. So these ideas have gone through a kind of baptism of fire, really. They've actually developed, shall we say, within that martial aspect as much as anything else. So within quite stressful situations, it was found that that clarity that comes with the stillness and that spacious quality, both in body and mind, that comes with the stillness, actually works to our advantage. And then just raising the toes and the heels. So this is another application of Tai Chi, whether we're going through these processes, laying in bed before we get up in the morning, noticing our posture, doing the body scan or whatever, whether we're doing it seated, whether we're doing it standing. These are common threads that run through the whole practice. And then stepping in. You can, of course, have the chair there. And if you have that little bit of support, or if you're doing this alongside the wall, that still a quality is easy to find. If you're kind of like doing this on your own, it's a bit wobbly. It's quite hard to feel that. But with that little bit of support, you can, again, have some kind of confidence in this and discover its potential. And then taking a few steps either forwards or backwards, depending on where you have space. Try and keep the width of your step. Don't be shy of just placing the toes down to settle down before you step forwards or backwards, depending on what it is. Sometimes you want to do that. You know, if you do feel a bit wobbly, just lower in your toes and do a good thing, and then step back. And there will always be times when there are little wobbles. They're actually quite useful when we do this, because what we find out eventually is that when we start to wobble, we get that, actually we can find the root, we can find the stillness. Just by not hurrying and by settling, being aware of our weight, being aware of our body, so on and so forth. Okay, so 1 foot forwards and then sit back, and with this rotation in the arms, so they, between that and the transfer of your weight, the hands travel around a nice smooth curve. Again, as well as your weight moving, notice the opening and closing in chest and upper back, which will help to create a very smooth feeling of movement in your shoulders, because it takes the strain away from the shoulders, and then down through your elbows, wrists and fingers, almost like the whole of your arm, and especially the joints, are being very gently massaged. And then with the same quality, change into fisherman casting hand. So if you can feel that smoothness in your upper body, shoulders and so on, it gives you an idea of what you want to feel in hips, knees and ankles. A lot more difficult there, and again, you know, the gradual conditioning of muscle and tendon and ligament, the gradual awareness of how we distribute the effort, distribute the load, so that no one part of the body is overused, will contribute to you being able to find that feeling, but also imagining that feeling in those parts of the body may well encourage your body to find the right sort of posture. And shake out. You may notice if you do it that way around that suddenly you're working much harder in things like the muscles and so on. So now, bird folds its wings. So again, the relationship between what we think of as mind and body is not one way. It's not just in the body reaching the mind or the mind reaching the body. And which way we choose to take at any particular moment very much depends on what is working for us. Imagining a movement, imagining a quality may well help us to find it physically, but we may need a physical stimulus to understand what that quality is. so on and so forth. And then fisherman casting net. One more time. And shake it. So go back to your chair. So we work with the idea of connection in Tai Chi, connecting different parts of the body, feeling how feet influence the shoulders and so on and so forth, and connection of different elements of ourselves, what we think of as mind, body, movement or energy, are actually blending all the time, and we work with that blending process in Tai Chi. But from a physical point of view, if we can make that distinction, then structurally, the whole body works together. So the example I sometimes give to people is like a tent. And if you put a tent up, and you put a tent up somewhere, and it's nicely there. So say there, if I'm here, say I'm like the tent. I've got the guy ropes going out. If you were to take hold of one peg and move it, so say if I move my toes, you stretch out a little bit. That has an influence on the whole of the body. If it doesn't, I'll be stiff. But the thing about a tent is it's quite elastic. So you could take hold of a single guy rope of a tent and shake it, and the whole tent would move. And in the same way, although clearly, depending on what we're doing, some parts of the body are more emphasized than another, but none of them are isolated in Tai Chi. And the more we become aware of that, the more we work with this idea, the Chinese say, when one part of the body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Now that is both aided by the structure that I was talking about earlier, but also contributes to that structure. If we have that idea in mind, then we can start to reduce the straining on, say, for instance, a joint or a particular part of the body. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the standing, legs and so on are always going to take the lion's share, but we can at least think, well, we want to use the whole leg, not just the knee or the hip. And so, creating that space in what I sometimes refer to as the energy gates. The energy gates is a term applied to some of the big joints, like the knees, for instance, are energy gates. And like a gate, like a doorway or a road junction, if it becomes busy, if it becomes stuck, or so there's too many people crowding into the gate, it doesn't only affect the gate, it affects the whole body. So what we call opening the energy gates is a way of improving the movement through the whole of ourselves. And improving the movement through the whole of ourselves helps to keep the gates open. So I think knees are regarded as energy gates, shoulders, hips, possibly some others. It depends who you talk to and which tradition you're looking at. So settling down again, let your hands drop down, and then embrace tiger, return to the mountain. Hips sinking down, shoulders dropping, hands following. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. So hope that was useful.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike.
Yes, thank you. Very relaxing.